comparing the first generation of running boards to now the third.
About 9 months back, I had just started my YouTube channel, and one of the very first videos I did was how to install this Nerf bar running board on your Cybertruck. It actually did really well for my low standards at the time. While EVBASE didn't sponsor that video or even donate the board to me, they did agree to partner with me to allow my viewers to get a 20% discount by using my channel name CARisma. That's still the case today. I've had these on my truck for months and months and months and loved them the entire time. However, just recently, over the last few weeks, EVBASE reached back out to me and said, hey, we'd like to ship you our newest version, what we're calling our Gen 3 running boards. Would you please let viewers know what's different, how they're changed, what's better, what's improved? So here we are, that's what today is.
On your left side is the one I had first and for a long time.
And here on your right is the Gen 3 that we'll be installing on the truck today. Now this video won't be a walkthrough, it won't be an install guide. If you want that, I can leave that down in the description below to show you how I put these on. But this one's just gonna be what's different between the Gen 1 and the Gen 3, where has it taken us over the last 9 months? Here we go. But why running boards in the first place? I think they're instrumental in your truck. They're gonna help protect your investment. Chances are you paid somewhere between 80 and 120 grand for this truck. Running boards are gonna help people clear their feet before getting into your truck. That's huge. I first installed these running boards back in my truck in May. Now in May, it was 85, 90 degrees and it was beautiful, colorful Colorado, sun out every day. Well, times have changed since then. It's about 20 degrees out today. There's snow on the ground everywhere. I'm finding out I'm using these running boards every single time I get in the truck to clear my feet off. In addition, my kids use them. My father, who's a little bit elderly, he'll use it to get in the truck. They're just a real must-have. And as a part of this video here shortly, the next minute or so, I'm gonna show you how one of these running boards saved me thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars of damage on my truck when I hit something and my running boards protected me. The first two differences you'll notice is the brackets. They're different shapes, different sizes, different amounts, different type bolts, a whole lot of differences. That's where the biggest separation between the Gen 1 and Gen 3 lies. The Gen 1, for example, is gonna look something like this with multiple fingers out each side, and the Gen 3 is gonna look very simple, nice and straight, just like this. Now, as you'll see here off the screen, there's multiple different types of styles. Yes, left and right, but also 1, 2, 3, and 4, whether you're starting with the back of the truck or up to the front. Not that it was difficult at all, because it wasn't, but you did have to pay very close attention to make sure you had these in order, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The other thing that added slight complication to this Gen 1 was that we used 2 different bolts and 2 different sizes. So you were removing one bolt from the truck and putting another one back in the other spot. There was also a small spacer that had to fill a void in the truck to make sure it was totally flush to screw this onto. And the directions were very simple, very thought out, and clearly conveyed to you, the consumer. So fast forward that to Gen 3 that we have today. Not only are these brackets the same, whether they're 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, but they're the same left or right. So you get 10 of these in your box of the Gen 3, and they're literally all the exact same, no exceptions, no differences.
Also with these Gen 3s,
they're all the same exact bolt. All come in a bag like this. So again, no trying to figure out which one goes where. And they are now including this little wrench that goes with it. So with this little 13mm wrench, you have everything you need to get this in the mail and then put it on the truck the same day. I also mentioned the number of brackets was different. So while there's 4 of these brackets, 2 bowls in each, there's actually 5 brackets in Gen 1. Notice there's 1, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th. So far, we've talked about Gen 1 and Gen 3. Well, what about Gen 2, you might ask? And I'm glad you did. Here's where you see some of the difference, and here's where EVBASE has been able to simplify this even more than they already have. So previously, while it didn't matter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they did matter left and right. And what they did in Gen 3 to make it where that doesn't matter is they added 2 sets of holes, you can see here, rather than just the one ovular hole on this side. Also, it's just a little bit shorter, but it is a tad wider, and I mean maybe a 1/16 of an inch to an 1/8 of an inch bigger, so it's about the same. But having these double holes makes it possible that it doesn't matter if it's left or right, you just slightly move it over. But it actually makes it really simple that now with Gen 3, you don't have to worry about left and right at all.
Here's a peek underneath. So you can see here is the Gen 2, where it's just gonna have 1 slot for the bolt up top right here, whereas the Gen 3 has the 2 different ones you could pick left or right.
I want to show you one small thing I did different with Gen 3 that I did with 1 or 2. I put a gap in between the truck and my running board. Where I had that little ovular bracket, I extended this out away from the truck as much as possible. Now, you don't have to do that, but I'll tell you why I did. Two reasons I extend mine out. One, I want it to be farther away from the truck. That's going to help be a buffer if I were to run into anything, especially off-roading. I mentioned at the beginning that I totally wrecked my Gen 1 running boards when I hit this giant rock when I was off-roading. And I mean giant rock. I think you hear that and you think big rock, it was giant. But me hitting the running board and not my truck saved me damaging, most likely, what would be my passenger door. It hit this really hard and just bent the bracket, but not my truck. So if that were to happen again in the future, I'd much rather damage this $500 running board than my really expensive to repair, I'm guessing, stainless truck. The second reason is, and I know this now that I'm deep into winter with all the snow, I liked it away from the bed a little bit here, away from the edge of the truck, to allow snow to drain off both sides. So the Gen 2 ones I had on, I butted up right up against this plastic, and I could tell snow would mound up and build up here almost like a little skating half pipe in the truck all the time. So by pulling these away, which I've done, it very much more allows it to drain through. Now, obviously the snow is going to drain through all these little different Cybertruck cutouts, but having it to be able to drain on the inside is also a benefit. Again, you do you, but I feel like I like it out away from the truck just a little bit more. The other benefit you have of the Gen 3 is it mounts very easily from the bracket to the board itself. You're just gonna have those two 13mm bolts that are gonna bolt right down through this into the threaded anchor on the board itself. Very simple. Gen 1 was a little trickier. You had these little shims that you had to slide in between here and pull up, and then this bracket here would come pinch down something like this. Again, not that this was hard, you could figure it out, but it was a little bit more complicated than set it against the board, screw two bolts in. The second to last difference, here it is. The Gen 3 are gonna sit right at the truck, whereas Gen 1, which you'll see here, sat just underneath that lip. Now, what does that matter? Well, it really doesn't. The only way that would matter to you is if you specifically needed these to be as low as absolutely possible, then perhaps Gen 1 would be the best for you. Now, I kind of like this better because it gives me more clearance as to not scrape things that I'm going over. I feel like that's a benefit of the Gen 3.
So when I hit that big rock I keep telling you about, surprisingly it didn't damage the board too much, but what it did do is it wrecked this bracket. As you can see here, this part closer to my thumb, that should be exactly opposite of this upper bracket, and it bent down a good like 2.5 inches from where it originally was. So like I said, I nailed it good. All the more reason to get yourself some running boards because it really could protect you like it did me.
Had this damage happened to the side of my truck, you're talking about thousands, potentially tens of thousands of dollars. And it wouldn't be even too far-fetched to think, had I scraped along multiple panels or doors, maybe even to a corner panel with this, I could have totaled my truck, but this $500 running board literally saved it.
This next difference, while not being as obvious as two totally different brackets, is arguably much more important. That difference has a question you should be asking, and that is, will these running boards affect how I jack up my truck? And the short answer is, yes, it will.
While there were only 4 of these old style brackets, one of them covered up something really important. So on your Cybertruck, there's 4 different spots that they've designated. This is where you're supposed to jack the truck up. In fact, they're called lift points. The whole bottom of your truck, whether you know it or not, all consists of battery, except for these 4 exclusive spots that they're hard enough to be able to lift a 3-ton truck, but also not damage that really expensive battery. Let me show you one of these lift points here. As we go right underneath the truck, you can see it's gonna say right there, lift point. That's where your jack has to go. But the problem with the Gen 1 bracket is it went right here. As you can obviously see, it's gonna cover half of this lift point. The way your new brackets are positioned, they leave all 4 of those lift points open where you can easily get a jack to it. Now that being said, if you have a good quality jack that has a big head on it with some like fingers, it can still reach around where that board is and still lift it up. I've done it myself personally. But if you just have like a really thin neck bottle jack, or you're not really comfortable doing this in general, I would maybe choose to go this Gen 3 route because of that specific point.
I do think I've covered now most of the differences between the Gen 1 and the Gen 3. One last slight difference between the 2 and 3. So you'll see here, here's the 3 that we're looking at. This is totally straight. Again, I kind of like this look, but let me show you Gen 2 where that's slightly different.
What's here on my passenger side of the truck is just that, the Gen 2, and this is where you can see it has this little bevel built in. So starting about 1.5 inches, 2 inches into the truck, it kind of takes a slope down, and it continues that slope all the way down the truck, and even to the end of the fingers here, it all has that little slope to it. So not a huge issue at all, unless you're coming out of your truck on a slippery, icy day.
you could have a tendency to hit this little lip where the bevel kind of leans down and slide off just a bit. Again, I'm splitting hairs, but there is that slight possibility you have with this you wouldn't have with the Gen 3, where there's just the abrupt fall off and not like an angled slope down.
Okay, last and final difference, this one again between the second and third generation. You'll notice here the second generation has these little small Cybertruck prints throughout. The other side has larger, which I'll show you in a second. Why I preferred to go with these smaller ones is a really important reason.
Again, here with the Gen 2.
You'll notice here I got the big Cybertruck symbol, really cool, but then I have these big gaps along the way. Now, I like the gaps, and rather than a steel board, because that lets the snow and the grime and all the water and salt fall through, that's great. However, these being a little bit larger, this caused me a problem one day. I was out on a dinner date with my wife. She stepped out of the truck as I was holding her hand, and her high heel went through one of these little knobs. Now, again, you could be talking about a perfect storm. Me and my boots, like that's not a thing. I'm not stepping through these, but it did happen with my wife, and if it happened once, I was worried it could potentially happen again. But that is one small benefit I would say that also leans towards Gen 3 as well. Last and final difference, and this is a big one. The Gen 3 running boards now ship from within the United States. So if you're a US customer, you'll get these from California, which means you'll get these in a matter of days than a matter of weeks. When I first got mine, I waited, I think, 3 weeks for it. Nothing bad, but I knew that ahead of time. These Gen 3s I got, I think it was 4 days. They're at my doorstep. Huge benefit. That's when I thought I was done buying running boards. Now that I'm 3 generations in, I did just notice that they have electrical running boards that flip out when you open the door. Man, should I get those? If somebody interested, let me know. Subscribe to the channel, because eventually I'm gonna do it since I have an accessory Cybertruck problem. Hopefully this video helps you. If you were on the fence at all about which gen to go with, is one worth the other? Are they worth the money? What's the differences? Hopefully I did a decent job explaining these to you. And if you are gonna pick up a set of these, use my channel name CARisma. You'll get the maximum discount they have available. And also they'll give me a 2% kickback. Anything I get is going right back into this truck to more accessories. Help me, help you, and I'll see you in the next video.